Welcome back to another Coach's Show with head coach Jim Flannery, Behind the Culture with head coach Jim Flannery. Coach, we teased last time most memorable or most exhilarating wins, and I gave you sort of a couple parameters, only one per season. So you couldn't just choose the 3 victories that reached the Elite Eight back in 21-22, but I wanted to get 4 or 5 of your top victories. But we're also going to touch on a couple. We're not necessarily going to go deep into 4, but a couple of the most painful losses in your career. And I know it's been 23 years, but I also have been around you long enough that you probably can quote the score for about 500 of your games.
Maybe 10 years ago, but my memory's gotten worse. I think, I just had another decade change. So, but yeah, I used to have a good memory. It's receded a little, but it's not terrible.
I'm going to give you another couple seconds just to let everybody know, if you didn't already see it on social media, Coach Flannery turned 60 years old after the victory over Villanova. But before we get to Villanova, can you tell me a couple of the most memorable victories and most painful losses?
Sure. Well, I think if you look at obviously the Iowa game in Iowa City 3 years ago, where we went to our first Sweet 16, winning that second round game against Iowa. Came down the wire. Lauren hits the 3 to put us up 1. We get a stop. We get 1 out of 2 free throws, and then they miss a couple kind of point blank shots at the buzzer or right before the buzzer. And first Sweet 16, so I think that one certainly stands out. My first time I got to coach an NCAA tournament win was, in Knoxville, Tennessee, on Tennessee's court against Syracuse. Even though it wasn't the most aesthetic game, just to win an NCAA tournament game for the first time, I think that one stands out. Of course, the 4 overtime win over Drake, probably 7 years ago. I think 108-100, a 3-hour game. Just the ends of the regulation and a couple of the overtimes. I think there was only one end of, besides we ended up winning by 8 in that 4th overtime, but there was only one other, either end of regulation or overtime, that didn't come down to one team had to score. So that sticks out. There, another one that's kind of you weren't here for this one, but we won a game against Northern Iowa where we were down 4 with 7 seconds to go. And this was before you could advance the ball. So we were down 2, didn't score, had to foul, and they hit 2 free throws with 7 seconds left. We had, I think, 1 timeout left. So we threw it in. Laura Spanheimer drove it the length of the floor and laid it in with 2.9 or 3.0 to go. So right around 3. So, full court layup. We're still down 2. It's their ball. Again, they can't advance. They had used a timeout. They had a 5th-year senior who ran the baseline and hit the back of the backboard on the inbound pass. So violation, ball out to Creighton. We used our final timeout, drew up an out-of-bounds play, made it 2 to tie it, sent it to overtime, and we won in overtime. So down 4 with 7 seconds with no advancement. That one kind of sticks out too. So those are the ones that probably stick out the most, at least in this short time.
Couple of ones in my memory that I think about are, and I don't have the memory that Flan has, but I think about there was a game against Seton Hall where we went to overtime and held them scoreless during overtime. So if you look at the box score, or if you look at the final score in the media guide, you're saying this has to be a typo because it's like a 15-point win in overtime, but we held Seton Hall scoreless. So that one is both painful for Seton Hall when I talked to them, and memorable for myself. And that Drake game, I was on the radio call that entire time, and I remember Audrey Faber hitting a couple of free throws at the end of, I think it was the 3rd overtime. She got the foul called, and the Drake fans were livid that the foul was called. It was in the final seconds. And then one more that I remember was MC McRory hitting a half-court shot to win the game, and I can't recall who that was against, but it was here at Sokol. Do you remember that game?
that was against Kansas. That was to tie it and send it to overtime.
Okay.
So, but you're right. It was a close to half-court shot that sent the game to overtime against Kansas, and then we won. There are a lot of Seton Hall games that could fall on that list. I mean, a couple of years ago, Morgan had the tip. We're down one, and Morgan tipped it in at the buzzer to send us to the next round. So we've had a lot of classic games with Seton Hall.
You can go back further. We were down, and Emma hits a three, or it was Emma found Morgan to hit a three to get us close before they ended up winning that game. So
yeah, that was quite a game.
And one of the painful ones, I may steal your answer, is in that same series with Seton Hall, we lose to them in the Big East tournament, and it was a last-second shot where they found a wide-open player down low that got the bucket to win the game. That was in the 21-22. It hurts, but at the same time, it may have helped you because it may have motivated or helped get a little more rest for the team going into the NCAA tournament run.
Yeah, and who knows? I said, had we won that game, we might have been in the 8-9 game instead of the 10. We maybe fell to a 10 seed. And got to play a 2 instead of a 1, which wasn't like that's not easy. But things kind of worked out that year. But that was a painful loss. I mean, we've had a couple to St. John's. The first NCAA tournament game I was the head coach in.
Yeah.
Carly hit 2 free throws with 5.5 seconds left, and their little point guard, they threw it in, passed it to her on a diagonal cut, and she maybe double jump stopped in the lane into a layup and at the buzzer to beat us by 2. We were a 14 seed. No 14 seed at that time had ever beaten a 3, and we were this close to going to overtime with them. That was super painful. We had another one, probably one that I regret a lot as a head coach is we were up 2 against St. John's. We were up 1 against St. John's with the ball. And the shot clock to game clock differential was only about 5, and I used a timeout. They weren't going to foul, I don't think, at that time. And I used a timeout too early. They ended up fouling. We split the 2 free throws, and then they went down and hit a 2. That was conference tournament of about 2016. So I think that, super. And that was a team that maybe was on the bubble, losing. I think that was a conference tournament game. But I think as a coach, you have regret sometimes that sometimes it's just bad luck you lose a game. But I think in that case, it was a learning experience for me. I don't know why I used the timeout at the time that I did. So we've had some painful losses. Those are both St. John's games. But conference tournament, we lost 3 conference tournament games in 4 years. The first one was to Drake in overtime by 1. And then we lost a game to Evansville. I think that was 2 years later on a shot at the buzzer. We lost 47-45 with, I think it was 0.2 of a second left. They hit the shot. And then the following year, we lost to Northern Iowa. We were up 1, and there was a hand check foul with 7 seconds left. They hit 2 free throws. We drove it down to the rim and missed at the buzzer. So we lost three conference tournament games in a period of 4 years by a total of 4 points. So we could have been in the NCAA tournament, 3 out of 4 years had we finished those games.
That's a good transition point. Another topic I wanted to talk about this week was seeding and NCAA tournament. Now, over the last 12, 13 years, we've been able to elevate this program from there were times where you and I and the team were in this room. This is the women's basketball lounge, and we were over in the media area and the kitchen watching the selection show. And it was the first year that they did the last 4 in and the first 4 out, where they announced that these 8 teams were on the bubble, and we were part of that 8, and we came down to the very last announcement. Ironically, it was an entry to play Iowa. It wasn't the one that everyone thinks about, but it was the first time we played Iowa in the NCAA tournament, and we beat another player of the year, that being Megan Gustafson.
Yeah, there were a couple different the first NCAA tournament win, we were, I think, a 10 seed. We were one of the last teams in. That's the team that beat Syracuse in the NCAA tournament. We were an at-large team.
Yeah.
Or no, that was the second year we were in. We had gone and lost to St. John's the previous year, and then we went that following year as an at-large. And then the year you're talking about, I think, was 17-18. It was March of 2018, and we were the last of those 4 teams. So pretty hysterical reaction, and like you said, we got to go out to Los Angeles and play Iowa. The last couple of years we've been comfortably in versus those years where you're biting your nails and you're paying attention to every score that last week, hoping that all the mid-major leagues that their best team wins. Hoping that the South Dakota States and Gonzagas, that are teams that maybe would be in anyway, would win their conference tournaments.
What does this program have to do to get to that next level of hosting? And we've toyed with the idea. We've bid a few years. We've hoped at certain points. But I think about last year, the team only lost 6 games, and we were never really in consideration to host. Think about, we had as little as 4 losses. And this year we have 4 losses, and we're not right now in consideration to host. What do you have to do? Because your schedule is strong every single year. Do you have to get to the point of having, obviously if you're undefeated, if you're UCLA, you're the number 1 team in the country. But what's the difference between where UCLA is and where we are, and not getting to that next level of hosting and setting yourself up in a better position?
Well, I think our non-conference scheduling has been really, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but it's been really good. Like, we've given ourselves a chance for a lot of really good wins, and I think that's important, because the committee wants you to play good teams, they want you to beat good teams, and depending on how good the league is, and we're not getting as many bids this year, you've got to go out and play good non-conference teams. I think the thing that hurt us last year more than anything, and like you said, we were 24-4 going to the conference tournament. Had we beaten Georgetown in the semis and then maybe lost to UConn in the finals, we would have been a higher seed, but we certainly wouldn't have hosted.
Mm-hmm.
But I think optics matter. If you think about last year, both games to UConn were not, the game in Omaha, we got just boat raced. And then at UConn, we were actually ahead in the third quarter, but ended up losing by 20. But I think, if you look at this year, had we lost to UCLA, 70-65 instead of 70-41, that matters. It matters to the committee when how did they do against the very best teams? We lost by 18 to Kansas State. If you lose that game by 4 to 6 points, that plays differently with the committee. So it's absolutely, it's quality wins and not having bad losses. We haven't had that in the last 2 years, but I do think when you play those really good teams and elite teams, it has to look better than it's looked. And again, there's reasons for that. Those teams are really good, but hopefully we're in a position where we're playing those teams at least more competitively than we have. I think that's a big piece of it. But I do think our schedule's been good, and then, our league this year probably isn't at the level that it was a couple of years ago when we had 5 teams in. So that's going to hurt us a little bit in terms of just what seed we get. But I still think if we finish strong and we either beat Connecticut or we play them in a competitive way, that's going to matter.
Okay. Looking at the league this year, you mentioned it, we're probably looking at a 2-bid league, especially with some of the results even yesterday. Seton Hall falling to Marquette hurts them, and not to disparage Marquette, but Marquette's not at that bubble level where Seton Hall was. Are you surprised with where the league has settled this season? I know there's some surprise teams, certainly. Marquette itself, they were picked to finish 10th, and they look like they're going to be at least a top 5. With the results yesterday, you've clinched a bye, which isn't something that you were writing down as a goal, but it's a first step. And what I mean by a bye is the top 5 seeds in the Big East tournament don't play in the opening round. 6 plays 11, 7 plays 10, and 8 plays 9. And worst case, we would finish at no lower than 4 this year if we lost the rest of our games, which please don't do.
No, I don't think we're going to try to do that. Was there a question in there? Just kidding.
Probably not. The question is, were you surprised with where the league has fallen this year?
Well, I think, I think some of the teams scheduled the right way. It's a matter of 1 or 2 wins. If Seton Hall maybe had beaten Princeton, Villanova I thought played the right schedule. They won some big games. They just didn't win quite enough of them. They played a lot of good teams and beat some. They just needed maybe 1 or 2 more. But here's what has happened a little bit. Our league, the transfer portal hasn't necessarily been great to us in terms of, if you look at Villanova, Lucy Olson leaves,
right.
Second or third leading scorer in the country. They lost their post player to Maryland. They lost another little guard to SMU. Those losses, Marquette lost a transfer to Iowa State and a transfer to Notre Dame. I mean, those, going back a couple years, Anissa Morrow leaves DePaul and, she's an All-American at LSU. So I think that's the struggle our league is going to have going forward, is being able to keep really good players in the league in this day of the portal and NIL and, where I think even 3-4 years ago, there's good coaches and good players in our league. It's just a matter of, can we keep them? And if we can, I think we're going to get back to hopefully at least a 4-bid league. But I think that's going to be crucial in terms of having, we're fortunate we've kept, had we not kept everybody, other than Emma, of course, who's a great player and a big loss, but we also have just a really experienced team. So I think the portal is going to be key in terms of our league specifically, because good players in our league can be good. As you see, Lucy Olson is Iowa's leading scorer.
Yep.
Christina Dulce is a starter for Maryland, who's a top 15 to 20 team. So, but that's going to be key.
Let's move into the game itself that we played now. The Blue Jays have had a bye week this week. They got the opportunity to get some rest, but the last game we played was at Villanova, and that's a sneaky tough win, because you go into that place and it's a tough place to play. They got good fan support, and we had some illnesses and injuries that were a struggle for us. Brooke Luttrell didn't actually make the trip because she was sick, and a number of other players were either having nagging injuries. There was some doubt about who was going to start before the game.
Yeah, and like you said, really good win from a lot of different standpoints. One, Villanova's a good team. They're good at home. They got a really good freshman guard, Jasmine Bosco. I really liked her, and they got a good team. They've beaten some, they've got some really good wins, and like you said, we had some uncertainty going out there. Brooke got sick the night before. Found out she wasn't going to make the trip. Morgan had a little bit of a respiratory thing going on, so she took the day before off. And I felt like, we felt like she'd play and maybe play 25 minutes. Well, she played 37. And we needed her, she and Lauren both had big games, and Kennedy Townsend, huge basket late in the fourth quarter. And I thought it was a good, gritty win on the road. It was our third game in 7 days. We instead of the Wednesday, Saturday, we played Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. To play that third game in 7 days on the road against a good team and come away with a win, I thought we executed down the stretch and showed a lot of composure and toughness.
I'm going to get you out of here on a couple of questions. I know that we're coming off a men's team that had won 9 straight but lost a tough game at home to Connecticut, and some of the media latched onto the notion that the men's team hasn't had their bye and they're a little tired. How much does it help a team to get a little bit extra rest, and what does it do when you're in a stretch like what the men are on right now, where they've played 10 games in a row without that bye?
Yeah, well, it certainly depends on the depth of your team, right? I mean, if you're 9 or 10 deep and you're willing to play and you're regularly playing 9 to 10, you can probably handle that differently than if you're a team that's 7 deep or 7.5, and I think that's a big piece. But yeah, I mean, we have older players, so their bodies are a little more likely to break. Like I said, with there's been more flu and more sickness going around. If you have kids in elementary school, and I have younger kids, and the number of kids that are out of school right now. So our players aren't immune from that. So I think that's a big piece too, is like, can you keep everybody, it's not just their body parts, it's are they healthy from they don't have an infection or a virus or anything like that. But yeah, I think this week came at a good time for us, because like you said, I mean, and I said, Morgan kind of had a little bit of a respiratory thing, and Brooke the same thing. And so to give them, we took Sunday off, we took Wednesday off. I think it is good that you have that. When we first got in the league and they said, oh, you guys are going to need and want that bye, I was kind of like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But I do think it depends on how deep your team is too, though. Like, you can play, if you're playing 9 or 10, and really what you do, you modify your practice. When people say, well, can so-and-so play 35 minutes in a game? Well, if you do your job and you modify practice so they're not, they're a little more rested on game day, that's the key this time of year. In February, you can't be practicing long. You got to have short practices, crisp, get just enough repetitions without getting your kids tired and more beat up.
Last thing I want to do is look forward to the game that we have coming up against Georgetown. We'll play Saturday, televised on FS1, 3 o'clock game, but it's also Senior Day. I'll let you finish on this. First, a preview of what Georgetown presents in challenges, and what does it present as a challenge, because we're celebrating our seniors. It's Senior Day here, the last weekend home game, so a chance for parents to come up and celebrate. But how do you manage the emotions of your seniors, and what challenges will Georgetown bring as you come back in that second game?
Sure. Well, Kelsey Ransom, their fifth-year guard, she's a really good all-around player. She leads in all games. She leads the Big East in scoring. She's averaging 19-ish and almost 18 in league games only. So she's a really good defensive player. Really can drive it. Super physical. They've got a wing player, Rivera, who's a really good shooter. They got a dynamic freshman point guard and a good post player, Ariel Jenkins, who's a senior, who's leads the league in rebounding and averages over 4.5 offensive rebounds a game. So we got to keep her off the glass. Defensively, they'll pressure you and keep you out of balance. So, we tell our team that their record isn't what they wanted it to be, Georgetown's, but we lost to them in the conference tournament, so our players will know that we need to respect them and prepare the right way. I mean, I hope everybody comes out to watch our seniors go out in the fashion that we hope they deserve. But yeah, it'll be hopefully we play well and we win the game, and then we can be emotional after the game. And that's why we've a long time ago we did pregame senior ceremony before the game, and I just think it was probably misguided, because now you go through that emotion and then you say, okay, now we need to throw the ball up and you guys need to be focused on how to beat Georgetown. So they'll help each other out. I think that's a key. We've got 7 of them, and so I think they'll hopefully we can, Mal can tell a few jokes before the game to keep them a little more lighthearted, and then we'll celebrate them after the game. So just again, I know the weather's not great, but hopefully we have a great crowd and we can send these guys out in the right way.
Well, Coach, thanks for joining us. I will echo your comments. Please encourage everyone to come out and see this senior class. You've only got 3 opportunities left to see this group against Georgetown on Saturday, February 15th at 3 o'clock. We play St. John's the following Wednesday. So within the next week, 2 of the last 3 times that you'll see this team here at DJ Sokol Arena, and the final game coming up in March against Villanova. Thanks to everyone for listening and for watching us here on YouTube. I encourage you as well, if you have questions for Coach Flannery, send them out to my email, which is just my name, glennsisk@creighton.edu. This has been Behind the Culture with head coach Jim Flannery.
Thanks, Glenn.